The human brain is a highly efficient prediction engine. To conserve energy, it physically adapts to ignore consistent, repetitive sensory data. Psychologists call this habituation. If a pattern is predictable, your brain simply tunes it out. The ultimate real-world test of this is a pre-flight airline safety announcement. It is a completely message-hostile environment. You know the script: where the exits are, how to buckle the seatbelt, what to do in a loss of cabin pressure. The pattern is so predictable that audience habituation is absolute. Nobody listens. But on a flight to San Diego, a flight attendant named Karen Wood changed the script. She told her passengers that there might be 50 ways to leave your lover, but there were only 6 ways to leave her aircraft. She cracked jokes, and her passengers actually stopped what they were doing, listened, and eventually applauded. Earning an audience's attention relies on a very specific mechanical action. You have to actively break a pattern and force their internal guessing machine to fail. When that guessing machine fails, the body responds with a biological emergency override system. Psychologist Paul Ekman identified the universal physical marker for this reaction, the surprise brow. When our predictions fail, our eyebrows instinctively curve upward. This biomechanical reflex physically widens our field of vision. It forces the body to temporarily freeze and absorb a rush of new data. But there is a structural problem with this reflex. Surprise is involuntary, and it only lasts for a second. How do you take a 1-second biological flinch and stretch it into 30 minutes of focused attention? Triggering that physical override is easy. Maintaining it, however, requires a completely different cognitive strategy. To understand that strategy, look at these 2 made-up words. Both of them break your expectations, but cognitive researchers found they trigger entirely different reactions. The word henshin tends to cause a frustrated frown. Frog, on the other hand, triggers an "oh" reaction. It works because it is post-dictable. The twist makes sense in hindsight. It sounds exactly like the word frog. Henshin is just a frustrating gimmick with no underlying logic. We see this mechanic in action when the Center for Science in the Public Interest tried to warn moviegoers about the fat in theater popcorn. Simply stating 37 grams of saturated fat didn't break anyone's guessing machine. So they showed a medium popcorn next to a full day's worth of fatty food: a bacon and eggs breakfast, a Big Mac with fries, and a steak dinner. Suddenly, the unhealthy claim wasn't just noise. It was an immediate post-dictable repair of the audience's understanding of nutrition. True insight occurs only when we break someone's guessing machine along the axis of your core message, and then use that message to help them repair it. Once you deliver that initial insight, you have to hold their focus. Screenwriting instructors like Robert McKee teach writers to design scripts around turning points, narrative devices planted specifically to force an audience to ask, "What will happen next?" Behavioral economist George Lowenstein mapped this exact same mechanism in human psychology. He called it the gap theory of curiosity. Lowenstein found that curiosity is not a passive desire, it is a literal pain. When we sense a specific gap in our knowledge, it creates a cognitive itch, and we are highly motivated to scratch it. What we perceive as sustained, rapt interest is actually just an audience actively working to relieve the discomfort of not knowing the answer. But you can only feel a gap in your knowledge if you have some baseline understanding of the topic. What do you do when the audience has an absolute blank slate? When they aren't facing a knowledge gap, but a total knowledge abyss? In the 1960s, a 29-year-old television producer named Roone Arledge faced this exact hurdle. He was tasked with making a national television audience care about regional, highly obscure NCAA college football games. Arledge bypassed the abyss by changing the broadcast. Before showing a single play on the field, he broadcast footage of the local campus. He showed the weather, the fans in the stands, and laid out the history of the specific school rivalries. By providing this preliminary context, he built a baseline of knowledge. He filled in the abyss just enough to create a distinct, scratchable gap. Suddenly, viewers in other states actually cared who was going to win. To make an audience care about a completely unknown topic, you must first supply enough context to make them realize exactly what information they are missing. Applying this means shifting our entire approach to communication. Instead of sitting down and asking, "What information do I need to convey?" we have to start asking, "What questions do I want my audience to ask?" The ideal model for this is a cinematic treasure map. It doesn't give you door-to-door, turn-by-turn directions. It gives you a few key landmarks and a giant red X. When we reveal information in this kind of sequence, letting each discovery lead naturally into the next, we engage the brain's internal search for the X. It functions much more like flirting than lecturing. That is the mechanical formula for a sticky idea. Break their guessing machines to capture their attention, and then immediately open a knowledge gap to hold it. Once you successfully engineer that itch of curiosity in your audience's mind, they will willingly follow you anywhere to scratch it.